Nobody tells you that the day your mother is buried is also the day you find out who your family really is. Margaret Olson died on a Tuesday in October, the way she had lived, quietly, without complaint, without asking anyone for anything. She was 71 years old, a retired school teacher from Dayton, Ohio, who had raised 3 children in a house that smelled like cinnamon and old books, who had worked double shifts after her husband left to make sure nobody missed a meal, and who had, in the final years of her life, been cared for almost entirely by one person. That person was her daughter, Claire. Claire Olson was 34, unmarried, and had moved back into the family home in Dayton 6 years ago when her mother's health began its slow decline. She had given up a marketing coordinator position in Columbus to do it. She had given up an apartment she loved, a social life she was still rebuilding, and somewhere along the way, the particular version of herself that existed before she became a full-time caregiver. She cooked 3 meals a day, drove her mother to every oncology appointment, slept with the baby monitor on because Margaret sometimes got confused in the night and wandered. She did this without complaint because she loved her mother. That was the whole reason. It needed no other explanation. Her brothers, meanwhile, had their own lives to attend to. Derek Olson, 38, lived in Phoenix with his wife, Sandra, and their 2 kids. He was a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company and drove a car that cost more than Claire made in a year. He called their mother on birthdays and major holidays, sometimes remembered to call on Mother's Day, and flew home for Christmas when the flights were not too expensive. He was charming and funny and could walk into a room of strangers and leave 45 minutes later with 5 new friends. He was the kind of man that other men admired and women trusted, and who had never in his life been made to feel that he wasn't enough. Their younger brother, Ryan, was 31 and lived in Nashville, where he played in a band that had been on the verge of breaking through for 7 years. Ryan was handsome and magnetic and perpetually broke, perpetually borrowing, perpetually promising to pay back what he owed as soon as things picked up. Their mother had quietly slipped him money 3 separate times in the last 4 years. Claire knew because she managed the bank accounts. She had said nothing. Margaret had asked her not to. The 3 of them had not been in the same room since the previous Christmas. And even then, Derek had left early to catch a flight. The funeral was on a Friday. The church was half full. Former students of Margaret's, neighbors, women from her Bible study group. People kept telling Claire that her mother had been a wonderful woman, which she already knew, and that she must be so proud, which she was, and that it must be such a relief, which it was not. Derek gave the eulogy. He was good at it, poised and warm, hitting every emotional beat with the precision of a man accustomed to presentations. He made people laugh twice and cry once, and afterward, 3 different women told him his mother would have loved it. He thanked them graciously and accepted a glass of white wine. Claire stood at the back of the reception hall and ate nothing and spoke to everyone who approached her and felt, the entire time, like she was watching the day from behind a pane of glass. Ryan played guitar at the graveside. That part at least was genuinely beautiful. The reading of the will happened the following morning in the living room of the house on Birchwood Lane, with a family attorney named Gerald Park who had driven up from Cincinnati and who had the careful, neutral expression of a man who had witnessed this particular kind of day before. They sat in a triangle, Claire on the couch, Derek in the armchair, Ryan cross-legged on the floor because he never sat in chairs if he could avoid it. Gerald Park opened his briefcase with a small click that sounded, in the silence, like a starting pistol. Margaret Olson's estate was modest but real. The house on Birchwood Lane, appraised at $240,000, a savings account with a little over $60,000, a small life insurance policy worth $30,000, a few pieces of jewelry, some furniture, a car that was 8 years old but ran fine. Derek reached across and touched Claire's arm. "Mom loved all of us equally," he said. "That's what this means. Something moved through Claire then, not quite anger, not quite grief. Something older and quieter than both. She looked at her brother's hand on her arm, and then at his face and said nothing. Ryan picked at the carpet. He did not look up. What happened next took 3 days to fully reveal itself, and it was worse than the will. On Sunday evening, Claire was in the kitchen packing her mother's dishes when she overheard Derek on the phone in the hallway. He was speaking quietly, but the house had always carried sound in unexpected ways. Margaret used to joke that its walls were nosy, and Claire heard enough. Derek was talking to a real estate agent, not to discuss the sale in a general way. He was talking about a specific buyer, a cash offer, an accelerated closing timeline. He was discussing it with the authority of a man who had already decided. Claire walked into the hallway, and Derek turned and had the decency to look, for exactly 1 second, caught. "When did you contact a real estate agent?" she asked. He lowered the phone. "I was just getting information. For all of us. You were negotiating a closing timeline. I heard you." "Claire." "I live here, Derek. This is where I live. I don't have another apartment. I gave it up 6 years ago. I need time." He had the expression that powerful people get when they are being reasonable in a situation where they are actually being ruthless. "The market is strong right now. If we wait, we might." "I need time," she said again. He looked at her for a long moment. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said into the phone and hung up. But he called the agent back that night. Claire heard him through the wall. Ryan knocked on her door Monday morning. He came in and sat on the edge of the bed and had the look of a man carrying something he would rather put down. Claire waited. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Okay." "Derek asked me before the will was read. He asked me to back him up, about the house, about pushing for a quick sale." Ryan looked at his hands. "He said if we moved fast, we'd both get our shares before any complications came up." Claire looked at him. "What complications?" Ryan was quiet for a moment. "He meant you," he said finally. "He was worried you might contest something or claim additional compensation for the caregiving. He wanted everything done before you had time to think about it." The room was very still. "He planned this before Mom was even buried," Claire said. Ryan nodded. He had the grace to look ashamed. "I told him no. Last night I told him no. I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry, Claire. I'm really sorry." Claire sat with this information the way you sit with something very heavy, carefully, without moving too fast. Then she picked up her phone and called Gerald Park. What Gerald Park told her, in the careful language of someone who had seen this before, was that she did have options. In Ohio, a living caregiver, even a family member, could, under certain circumstances, file a claim for compensation against an estate for services rendered. The 6 years of documented care, the surrendered employment, the medical coordination, these things had legal weight. He was not promising anything, but he was not telling her she had no ground to stand on either. She also had something else. 3 days after the funeral, while packing her mother's things from the bedroom closet, Claire found an envelope tucked behind a shoebox of old photographs. It was sealed and had her name on it in her mother's handwriting. Inside was a letter, 2 pages, written in the slightly unsteady cursive of her mother's final months, and a separate document, a letter of intent, witnessed and signed, stating that it had been Margaret's wish that Claire received the house outright, or be compensated from the estate for her years of care, and that this wish had not been included in the formal will only because Margaret had not wanted to cause conflict among her children while she was still alive. She had been trying to protect everyone, even at the end, even from the truth of what was fair. Claire read the letter twice. Then she sat on the edge of her mother's bed, in the room that still smelled faintly of her mother's hand cream, and she wept, not for the house or the money or even the years. She wept because her mother had known. Margaret had seen everything clearly and had loved her for it and had, in her own quiet way, tried to say so. She called Derek. He answered on the second ring, which meant he had been waiting. I found a letter, she said. Mom wrote it. There's also a witness document expressing her intent. Silence on the line. Gerald says it may not be legally binding, Claire continued, but it is certainly the kind of thing a judge finds relevant if this goes to probate litigation. It is also the kind of thing that becomes a matter of public record. More silence. What do you want, Claire? Derek's voice was different now. The salesman's warmth was gone. I want what's fair, she said. I'm not greedy. I'm not asking for everything. I want the house, or its equivalent value from the estate. I want the years I gave accounted for. And I want you to stop talking to real estate agents behind my back. She heard him breathing. She heard him calculating. Fine, he said, and the word had no generosity in it. It was the word of a man who has run the numbers and found that retreat is cheaper than war. But it was still the word she needed. It took 4 months to settle. Gerald Park earned his fee. Derek hired his own attorney, which cost him more than he had planned and produced less than he had hoped. Ryan signed whatever Claire needed him to sign and showed up to every meeting she asked him to attend. It was not a complete redemption, but it was something, the gesture of a younger brother who had looked at himself in a bad moment and decided to be better. In the end, Claire received the house. Derek and Ryan received their shares of the savings and the insurance, which was fair, and a reduced share of the eventual property proceeds, which Derek accepted with the brittle dignity of a man who will never quite forgive you for winning. Claire still lives on Birchwood Lane. She repainted the kitchen in February, a warm yellow that her mother had always wanted but never gotten around to. She found a part-time remote job that she likes and that leaves her time to think. She has a small vegetable garden in the backyard now, something she never would have done before. Ryan called her last month just to talk. They spoke for almost an hour. It was the longest conversation they had had in years, and neither of them mentioned Derek's name once. Derek sent a Christmas card in December, signed by the whole family, his handwriting, Sandra's name added neatly beside it, the kids' names printed at the bottom. Claire put it on the mantel because her mother would have wanted her to, but she did not call him. Maybe she will. Maybe she won't. Forgiveness is not a door that swings open on a hinge. Sometimes it's a window, and sometimes it's stuck. And sometimes the most honest thing you can do is leave it cracked and let in whatever air it lets in and call that enough. The house on Birchwood Lane smells like cinnamon still. When she bakes more now. There is nobody to bake for except herself, and she is learning, slowly, that this is reason enough. Her mother knew that. Margaret Olson knew, with the quiet wisdom of a woman who had spent a lifetime watching people take each other for granted, that the ones who give the most are rarely the ones who ask for what they're owed, and that this patience, this silence, this endless pouring out of themselves is both their greatest grace and the very thing that makes them easy to overlook. She had tried to fix it at the end, in her own small, imperfect way. Claire keeps the letter in the nightstand drawer, next to her bed. She doesn't read it often. She doesn't need to. She has it memorized by now, every word of it, including the last line, which was the truest thing her mother ever said to her. You were always the one who stayed. I hope you know that staying was never small.